Dr. Darnell Hunt headed a study entitled Why Hollywood is Frozen in the 1950s. The 2014 Hollywood Diversity Report showed some startling numbers. This study looked at 172 films released in 2011, the top 200 grossing movies, excluding the 28 foreign films in the mix, and 1,061 television shows from the 2011-2012 season from broadcasting cable networks, including dramas, comedies, and reality television, but excluding sport. He found that women only make up 36% of the cast on and off screen, while demographics show that women make up closer to 50.1% of the population. Additionally, 11% of films had a minority lead, 7.6% were written by a minority, and 4% of television broadcasts had a minority creator. All the while, minorities make up about 36% of the population. Now, as a scientist, I cannot just assume that this data has not changed since 2014. However, I can say that it has likely changed very little and would do very little to change the statistics at hand. These are some startling numbers. Now it seems from these numbers that the larger problem is not a predominantly white Oscars, but a primarily white Hollywood. The real question is, why is there such an underrepresentation? I suppose it may go back to socioeconomics, but I am getting ahead of myself. Go back to what I said earlier, but excluding sport. One more time.
But excluding sport.
I think that some of those numbers are worth looking into. I decided to look at the NBA, across 2 different conferences, with 3 regions per conference, 5 teams per region, and 15 players per team. There are a lot of individuals. I compared white to non-white players across the present teams, and found that 28.46% of all present players are white. That is a severe racial discrepancy. Even after inserting a rounding error, and inserting a significant margin of error, 33.67% of players are white. Naturally, this is an issue, but since the Oscars are coming up, let's compare this ratio to the MVPs. Since the 1955-1956 season, 49 MVP winners have been players of color, and only 11 have been white. That means that 22.45% of winners have been white. If we eliminate repeats, we see that there have been 24 minorities that have won, and only 7 have been white. That means that only 29.17% of MVP winners across the NBA's history have been white. In fact, the last white MVP was Dirk Nowitzki in the 2006 to 2007 season. If we go back to Hunt's original study, we see that minorities represent 36% of the population, and that means that whites represent 64% of the population. Race baiter and MSDNC host Reverend Al Sharpton has proposed that people boycott the Oscars because of the huge racial discrepancy. I say that we boycott the NBA until they actually have players that fit the racial diversity of America. Tell me, does the amount of melanin in your skin affect your ability to dribble, throw and catch a ball, or run down a court? Of course it does not. In the same way, melanin does not affect one's ability to memorize lines, portray emotion, or tell memorable stories. Is there a racial discrepancy at the Oscars? Maybe. However, if you say that there is, you must admit that there is a racial discrepancy with the NBA. If you cannot get yourself to admit that there is a racial discrepancy at the NBA, you must admit that there is not one at the Oscars. In the end, aren't there more important things that we should concern ourselves with?